Hey everyone, I'm back with some more Spear of the Church invasions. To be honest, I had kind of gotten away from doing these just because the videos didn't seem to get nearly as many views, and I just didn't think folks were all that interested in them. But I got some feedback on Reddit from folks asking me if I'd be doing any more of these, and I had quite a bit of material stockpiled, so I thought I'd go ahead and put one of these together. It's funny because this character at soul level 92, he gets summoned all the time for these Spear of the Church invasions, so much so that probably for every clip I show you, there's at least 5 or 6 that don't make it in here. So it's actually kind of a time-consuming process because I generally record every one that I have, and then I kind of make the decision afterwards whether to keep it or get rid of it. Because sometimes at the time of the fight, it seems like maybe it's not that interesting, and then you go back and look and you realize there is something interesting, or vice versa. That backstab was kind of questionable from my perspective, but I think backstabs are one of those things that are determined based on what your opponent sees. So if there's some latency, you may end up getting backstabs. You always got to watch people with shields up like that are kind of circling you. I had some conversations with folks, I think it was actually during one of St. Riot's streams, about kind of the etiquette, so to speak, of healing in these fights. And kind of my position going into that had been, okay, well, I'll heal, but only if there's multiple opponents. And this conversation came up because St. Riot was actually going through and fighting the Spear of the Church, and that spear was running off and healing constantly. But the general consensus seemed to be like, no, it's fine, go ahead and heal. So I think you'll start to see, even on some one-on-ones, I actually end up healing. I've had so many of these fights now. I mean, I've probably had, I don't know, 150 fights as a Spear of the Church now, and it's really interesting to kind of see how the different fights play out depending on how many people are involved, and you kind of get a quick sense of what kind of player you're up against early on. And what I've realized is that I think it's the one-on-one fights that actually give me the most trouble, because I don't get any kind of buffs at all, and I can't heal, and they can. So if you have a player that's even halfway competent and doesn't try to press his luck too far, they're going to win because they've got 15 Estus and you have none. And just even if they just poke away at you a little bit here and there, over time they will beat you. And I think I've got an example of that coming up here. I start foaming at the mouth as soon as I see the scythe, because I know the weapon art's going to come out and I'm going to get a parry and I'm going to end the fight. Most players don't use that weapon art the right way. They use it to close distance, which is not the way that you want to use that. The only thing tricky about parrying that is making sure you've got the spacing correct, because sometimes it's easy to get hit by that first, the magic scythe that comes out, and if that thing clips you, then you're going to eat the weapon art and you're going to take a lot of damage. But it can be parried on reaction, which makes it really dangerous. If there's any weapon in this game that triggers me, it's the Ring Knight Greatswords. I know I've heard Saints say it a number of times, but the weapon by itself is not that bad, and it's actually pretty easy to fight. And my strategy's kind of evolved now, where I go with a persevering weapon, especially when it's a player like this and they're just spamming L1 over and over and over. The hitbox on it seems really generous though. And when you've got somebody pursuing you along with somebody using the Ring Knight Greatswords, you gotta be really careful, because if you try to roll away from it, it's a good way to get clipped. And there I whiffed that backstab. I just find it a very frustrating weapon to play against. This guy with the crow quills, he's actually halfway decent, but now that he's got a poised up invader, because there were two of them, I don't think the R1 off that weapon is going to interrupt me, and that is bad news for him. So if you're ever in this situation against the Spear of the Church, where you've had phantoms in the world, and they're dead, and it's just you, you really have to treat the player as if he has permanent perseverance. Like hit him once and then you gotta roll out or move away. I was talking about this sort of in an earlier video. You can see there I just basically ignored his attacks and I was able to, and as if I was poising through them. I talked about this in one of my earlier spear videos, and Saint left a comment, and he was the one that actually used the word perseverance, and it's 100% correct. And actually Saint had a video the other day where he got summoned in. It was during stream and he made a video out of it. He got summoned in and it was a party of 4 and he had killed off the 3 phantoms. It was just the host left. And he had made the point where it's basically impossible to win for the host at that point. I would never say completely impossible, but almost impossible to win at that point unless you were being super, super careful. And that buckler is making me nervous as hell. I a lot of times I hear discussions about to parry or not to parry, and frequently what you'll hear is parrying, don't do it in duels because the players are too good to fall for it, but in invasions it's a good strategy, and that's kind of been my approach and my general mantra. But I think it's really the wrong framing to think about it. It's not a question of to do it or not to do it. It's a question of, at the margin, how many times should you do it? How often should you do it? I think it was like Solus in duels would parry on an occasion. You didn't do it very often, so it's a question of the optimal amount of parrying rather than whether you do it or not. You know, in a situation like that where a player switches to the buckler like that, though, it's pretty evident what they're planning on doing. But if you make a habit of switching to one-handed and two-handed back and forth, and you don't parry very often. So I had a ton of invasions that went just like this one right here that I typically edit out. I kept it in here just as an example of like the kind of stuff that happens. I have a few funnier ones later, but it's amazing to me how many of these fights last about 15 or 20 seconds, even if I'm not really trying to give the host hell. I think one of the core skills as a spear is the ability to chase somebody down with other players chasing you from behind and being able to keep pressure on that player while at the same time evading the attacks that are coming up from behind you. You have to almost have like a sixth sense of when somebody's liable to attack. But this turn and burn strategy is so effective, especially against players who maybe haven't done a lot of PvP and are kind of unfamiliar with that and maybe aren't expecting it. I have to say that hit was a little questionable. So one thing you have to be careful of here is if you do like to parry, you probably already know that uneven terrain can cause you to not take a riposte. And these stairs here occasionally will cause that problem, and in fact I think it causes that problem to me in this fight. I can't even get the backstab from behind him. And the reason I didn't try to go around the front is because the AI was running up on him, and if he would have hit him, that would have closed the riposte window. So I was trying to get whatever damage I could get out of it. I'd take a backstab over just a standard R1. you can see I'm an evolution in my approach where I decided to go ahead and heal even though there was only the one player there. I don't know. I mean, I almost feel like the ability to heal via spells, it creates this weird dynamic where being a spear of the church, you are strongly incentivized to have faith so that you can cast some type of healing spell. But then what that does is that creates this huge gulf between builds. So builds that don't have any faith are at a tremendous disadvantage. And I sometimes wonder if like a fairer approach or a better approach would be, don't let anybody use healing spells at all, but let everybody have like one Estus or two Estus or something like that. And that way it's really consistent and it's not as if you're really disadvantaged because you don't have faith. Like if I have a character that goes into the spear of the church, I will respect them if I need to make sure I have at least medium heal, because it makes such a big difference. And actually one of the things I've never tried to do, and I keep meaning to do it, is to see whether like the divine blessing or hidden blessing, whichever it is that actually heals you, if that works in these situations, or if the I forget what they're called, the little things that you get from Sigurd, if you're able to use those to heal up. I suspect you are. I've just never actually tried it, and I really should. And there you can see me while I'm pursuing him. When I see them chug, I stop running so that I can get 2 R1s instead of just the single running R1. And I see these guys are both obviously using curved greatswords, and they're both extremely reliant on the R1s, and they're not really mixing it up at all. So I've been thinking about a setup parry since the fight started, but when they're both on top of each other, I just can't take that chance. Especially with something that does as much stamina damage as a curved greatsword, because if the other guy hits me while I'm trying to do the setup parry, I'm going to get my guard crushed, and that'll probably be the end of the fight. So here I get my first opportunity to get one of them alone, and I go for the setup. And I've been playing around with the setup parries a lot lately. I remember I tried one against somebody who had invaded me, and they were using Gale's greatsword, and I should have been thinking about it, like I should have been a little bit more savvy about it. So he hit me once with an R1, he saw my shield up, and then immediately went into the weapon art where you take the weapon and start stomping up and down with it, and you jump up in the air, and I remember he took off like half my health. He knew exactly what I was going to do. So you have to be careful and kind of know your opponent. And the thing that I've really learned to watch for, and I don't know what this guy's trying to do here. I don't know if he doesn't realize that I'm healing via spells and that's not going to do any good. But what I've realized is look and watch and see, do they swing R1 once if they whiff and stop swinging? And if so, then they're disciplined about how they swing, and it's probably not worth trying to do a setup parry on them. But if they swing multiple times even when they whiff, that's a pretty good sign that you can go for the setup parry. And that's another common anti-pattern I see people fall into, which is the running R1 followed immediately by the R1. And I caught him like a frame before that Estus kicked in there. He'd even got the animation. It's kind of cool. A lot of times when I fight solo hosts, I'll just let them kill the first guardian, which I really shouldn't do. It's really stupid. but these fights just get so boring against the majority of hosts. And then occasionally I fight somebody who's good and I really regret letting them kill him, because they have such an advantage with Estus. But it's really the only way I've been able to keep my sanity in these fights and make them even remotely interesting. And I guess the cost of that is, for every 10 fights I make interesting, I end up handicapping myself and maybe causing myself a loss for the 11th. And I'll make that trade. And this guy reminds me of somebody who probably doesn't have a lot of practice blocking with his weapon, because that's the kind of thing that happens if you don't have a lot of practice with that, getting your guard broken. So I should say something about the length of the video. This video is almost twice as long as most videos I normally do, and I know some of the feedback I've gotten is kind of established a preference for shorter videos rather than really long ones. And I thought about breaking this into 2 videos, but it would have been such an artificial break. I really didn't see the point. So I just went ahead and left all the videos in here. And keep in mind that for, I don't know, like the 10 or so that I have in here, there's another 30 or 40 at least that I left on the cutting room floor just because I didn't think they were sufficiently interesting in any way. I don't know why that host didn't back off and heal. I think sometimes maybe people don't realize how much damage they're taking. Just not sure. And some videos just don't need commentary at all. This weapon scares me. The glaive class in general is a class of weapons that I've historically not done very well against. And I think this is the split leaf, and the combo power of this weapon is just out of this world. He's doing a good job too of just avoiding me. He's deliberately not engaging me if he doesn't have to. He's just trying to kill off the Guardian. I think he made the mistake of avoiding me too much. I think just a couple of simple turn and burns would have forced me to back off and he could have healed. This is an example of what I was talking about earlier. I essentially just let him go ahead and kill off the Guardian. I think he made a mistake there. I don't think he intended to drink the blue ash in Estus. I've made mistakes like that. That's super frustrating. So for the last couple of videos, I actually wanted to include me coming against the Spears of the Church, just to demonstrate a fact, which is it's really not that hard to beat the spears of the church, as long as you just keep your head about you while you're playing. This first clip I think is probably not too representative, just because I have a really good and pretty quick fight against the spear. Now this is something that's really annoying. Not only can you not go around and through your inventory while you're waiting for that first guardian to spawn, I can't do anything here either because I can't remember the guy's name he's yammering on, so I'm essentially stuck. I can't get into my inventory. Now fortunately, the invader is just waiting for me because he wants to try to cheese me with this spell. But if he had been aggressive, I wouldn't have been able to switch to the weapon I wanted, and that would have really frustrated me. And I know exactly what's going to happen. I can see what he's got. I know the weapon art's coming. And now the second guardian's going to spawn in, so I want to get rid of this guy quick style. So I just get right on him and start sprinting, and then you keep sprinting, and that way you can let the swing go and try to catch the roll. I was pretty amped after that, so I gave him a bit of the business with L1. I probably shouldn't do that. So here's the other one, and this one was kind of interesting. Well, I'll wait till the invader shows up. But as I've mentioned before, the top priority is to get rid of that first guardian before they show up, because if you've got both of them, that can be really, really difficult. So he's got a curved greatsword. And there, I thought about going for the parry, but I was afraid he'd punish it. I probably should have gone for it though. And you'll see, I think he realized his mistake because he doesn't do that again. I block at least one more running attack, and he does not block it. And here I know I'm just giving the Estus back away, but I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. And there he does not go for the swing. I really thought he would, having me so close to death that would be too tempting. But he was good. So he's a good player, which is kind of making me nervous because I'm not sure what I'm going to do. And then I realize I need to switch to my greatsword so I can try to space out his R1s. Because it's just so hard to do with a straight sword. And then the tenor of the fight completely changes. And here I hit the guardian twice, knowing full well it's going to cost me an R1 against this guy. And he panic rolls and I'm able to kill him. So I mean, even though I made tons of mistakes and I got a beating initially, I was still able to come out on top. Well guys, I hope you found this entertaining. Thanks a lot for checking in.